This is the story of a pattern written into DNA long before the Americas had a name for it, a genetic signature that resurfaced in a new world and became the mark of a horse both treasured and nearly erased. The horse we call the Appaloosa carries a visible code: spots, mottled skin, a white of the eye that shows like a human's, even stripes on the hooves. That code is traced to a single genetic region known as the Leopard complex, and it links a prehistoric past, a chain of human migrations and conflicts, and a modern movement to reclaim what nearly vanished. Imagine for a moment a flank like a night sky, dark hide punctured by pale stars. Imagine the quick turn of a compact, muscular animal that could outrun wolves and dance between buffalo on the plains. Picture a people who shaped such an animal not as property, but as a companion and an extension of their way of life. And then picture war and displacement that scattered those animals like leaves in a storm. Why was one horse once chased to the edge of extinction? And what did it mean to lose not only animals, but a living archive of knowledge and culture? If this story is drawing you in, click the card now to watch our short genetics explainer that breaks down how a single gene makes such diverse patterns. Deep time hides in fur. Geneticists have identified a set of variants grouped under what researchers call the Leopard complex, or LP. In technical terms, LP behaves as a dominant allele with pleiotropic effects. That means a single genetic change can influence multiple visible traits. In plain language, a horse carrying LP may show spots or blankets on its coat. But the same gene also tends to produce other markers people notice at a glance: mottled skin around the muzzle and genitalia, the white of the eye being more visible, and faint vertical stripes across the hooves. These features together make the Appaloosa instantly recognizable. But the familiar spotted blanket is only one outcome among many. LP can produce everything from a dark hide with a single white blanket over the hips to a patchwork of snowflake-like flecks across the entire body, or a varnished look where the patterned areas shine as if polished. Why such variety? Because LP is not acting alone. Its expression depends on other genes that determine the horse's base color and on modifiers whose interactions still puzzle scientists. Some horses carry LP yet show barely a hint of pattern. Others erupt into a dramatic constellation of spots. Studies of ancient DNA suggest that genetic variants associated with leopard-like spotting appear deep in the past, in remains and cave-associated contexts in Eurasia, tens of thousands of years old. In other words, the gene's history predates modern breeds and follows human migrations and animal movements across continents. Fast forward to the early modern era, and a different kind of movement. Horses brought by Spanish explorers and colonists crossed the Atlantic with the first European fleets. These Iberian horses dispersed widely across what would become the American West. Events of upheaval shaped how those animals spread. When Pueblo communities revolted in 1680 and drove Spanish settlers from parts of what is now the Southwest, many horses slipped into indigenous hands or into the landscapes to be claimed by tribes and communities. From the deserts to the river valleys, the horse adapted to new roles and new partnerships with the people who adopted it. Across the northern plains and the Appaloosa region in the Pacific Northwest, a distinct relationship between human and horse emerged. The people commonly identified in historical accounts and oral histories as the Nez Perce, who called themselves Nimiapuu, developed a selective practice that blended practical need and cultural meaning. Far from a mere utilitarian activity, their approach to horse stewardship reflected hunting strategies, social values, and an aesthetic sense. They sought animals that could travel long distances, turn swiftly in close quarters, and carry a rider over uneven terrain while conserving energy. Over generations, those priorities favored a phenotype that combined compact proportions, muscular hindquarters, and an endurance sculpted conformation, frequently displaying the spotted patterns tied to the leopard complex. This was selection shaped by purpose. When mounted hunters chased game or moved between seasonal camps, a horse that could accelerate, pivot, and maintain speed without burning out was priceless. The spotted coat became associated with those practical abilities and with identity. Horses marked by LP were woven into stories, ceremonies, and reputations. Historical labels that survive, including variations on the name Appaloosa that derive from the Palouse region, reflect both geography and cultural connections. It's important to say that the people who shaped these horses were not simple breeders in the modern industrial sense. They practiced stewardship informed by survival needs and spiritual understandings, and they held their horses within complex relationships of care and kinship. Genetics helps us see how the look developed, but morphology explains how the horse moved. The type that became known as the Appaloosa tended to be compact yet powerful. A short back for quick transfers of force, wide hips and deep gaskins for propulsion, and a chest and forequarters balanced to allow sudden turns. Their hooves, often showing the telltale hoof striping associated with LP, were sturdy. That combination of structure and the genetic signature produced animals exceptionally suited to the dynamic hunting that characterized life on the plains and river valleys. In competition and work alike, the Appaloosa's form translated into endurance, agility, and a surprising efficiency of movement. The story turns at the moment of fracture. In 1877, the Nez Perce War unfolded as a violent collision between U.S. military forces and communities resisting forced removal and confinement. Chief Joseph's name and the long, grueling retreat he led remain among the most resonant images of that period. Horses and people fled together, pressed into marches and skirmishes that left herds scattered, captured, stolen, or killed. Military campaigns and settler encroachment disrupted the carefully maintained lines of selection that had allowed the Palouse horses to carry their distinctive traits across generations. What followed was not only a loss of animals, it was the near erasure of a living, intergenerational knowledge about how to steward and shape a particular kind of horse. When herds were broken, genetic lineages were diluted. Stallions and mares were taken as spoils or confiscated for military use, and remaining animals were absorbed into new contexts where selection pressures changed. The word forbidden in this story must be understood as a metaphor for suppression and near erasure. Policies, warfare, and displacement made it increasingly difficult for the Nimiapuu and other communities to continue their traditions of horse stewardship. As a consequence, the phenotype that had been refined over generations teetered on the edge of disappearance. At the height of that crisis, the distinct form and culture-linked practices that produced the spotted horses could have been lost forever. Yet history does not simply end in loss. In the early 20th century, a growing interest in preserving distinct horse types led ranchers, enthusiasts, and historians to seek out the fading remnants of the Appaloosa phenotype. In 1938, a formal organization appeared to record and standardize the breed. The Appaloosa Horse Club was founded, as recorded in historical accounts. That registry and the breeders who gathered around it faced a difficult truth. Much of the original uninterrupted line had been broken, and if the breed were to endure, reconstruction would be necessary. Breeders introduced bloodlines from quarter horses, thoroughbreds and Arabians to restore the size, athleticism and reliability that had once been associated with the Palouse horses. At the same time, the signature spotted patterns were prized and selected for, with an awareness that the modern Appaloosa would necessarily be a blend, a designed revival rather than a perfect genetic time capsule. Science provided new tools. Advances in genetic testing allowed researchers and breeders to identify the LP locus, and modern tests can reveal whether a horse carries the LP allele even if it does not express the classic spotting. That capability changed how registries and breeders approached selection. The pattern could be pursued with greater predictability, and conservation efforts could aim both at maintaining the breed's functional qualities and at preserving its cultural and visual heritage. Still, it is essential to remember that LP is associated with traits, not destiny. It does not create courage or guarantee athletic prowess. Rather, it contributes to a constellation of physical markers that, in combination with training, environment and human stewardship, produce the Appaloosa we recognize today. The revival was not a simple return to an untouched past. It was a reconstruction rooted in respect for a living tradition and in practical choices by breeders who had varying priorities. Some emphasized show ring traits, others focused on working horse capabilities, and many aimed to honor the breed's history by keeping the leopard complex and its visible signs central. The modern Appaloosa is versatile. You will find them in endurance and trail riding, in western performance and in hunter rings, and as devoted family mounts. More than that, the horse serves as a living archive of a relationship between people and animals, of selection shaped by landscape, necessity, and cultural meaning. Throughout this arc, the Nez Perce and the Nimiapoo remain central voices. Their stewardship, their losses, and their later collaborations with preservation efforts are not sidelines in the narrative. They are foundational. Contemporary Appaloosa history must be told with attention to indigenous agency, and to the fact that these horses were woven into lifeways, songs, and stories. The survival of spotted horses through war and displacement is also a story of survival of people, memory, and identity. That linkage explains why many tribal members and descendants remain deeply invested in the Appaloosa's story and in how it is told. Today, when we see an Appaloosa moving across a hillside, the pattern is more than decoration. It is a visible convergence of deep genetic history, of human choices across centuries, and of resilience in the face of near erasure. The spots and mottling are living testimony that genes travel with people and that culture shapes genes through selection grounded in need and value. At the same time, modern science places that testimony under a new lens. We can trace alleles, estimate past distributions, and use DNA to understand how ancient lineages intersect with modern breeds. Where those scientific conclusions involve dates and time frames. For instance, studies suggesting that leopard-like variants appear very deep in Eurasian prehistory, perhaps as far back as 18,000 years in some contexts. They should be read as findings to be verified and contextualized by specialists. The narrative power of those numbers is real, but so is the need for careful scholarship. There is a moral in the horse's story that the word forbidden helps us feel. Suppression does not simply silence voices. It interrupts the passing of knowledge embedded in daily practice. But the arc can bend toward restoration. The Appaloosa's modern resurgence, through registries, through science, and through renewed respect for indigenous stewardship, shows how people can yet choose to preserve living traditions. When we watch an Appaloosa turn in a sudden circle, when we notice the white around its eye or the striping of its hoof, we see more than genetics or aesthetics. We see a continuity that survived conflict, a pattern whose meaning was remade and reclaimed. If this account moved you, consider learning more. Subscribe to the channel for deeper dives, follow the Appaloosa Horse Club archives, and visit reputable sources on equine genetics and Nez Perce history. The Appaloosa is not a mysterious relic. It is a present breathing link between past and future. A horse that once threatened with erasure now carries memory on its hide and the ongoing work of people determined to preserve both breed and story.